So yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so this is the question, Yumi, that I ask every single person that comes on. I think it's 70
Yeah.
or 80 guests so far. When you wake up in the morning, what is it that makes your heart just sing out loud for the day that's ahead of you?
I love that question. That is so beautiful. Um, for me, it would be it reminds me of like what is my highest purpose? And my highest purpose is to be really in love with my life. And when it's so I've got two children and I'm
How
married to
old?
an incredible man.
How old are
I've
your
got
children?
one's almost 5. He's 5 in April, and the other one's 1 year old.
Okay.
And literally every morning, I wake up being so grateful to be alive, to experience them. So yeah, every morning, like that's that. Like, how do I be so in love with my life so that I could love from the overflow
Wow.
for these beings that have given me the honor to be in their lives.
I like how you said that. Did you say love from the overflow?
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm.
So does that mean when we have so much self-love, we're able to like pour that out for others? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And um, I love this definition that Dr. Joe Dispenza, is one of my favorite teachers. To give is to receive, and to receive is to give. And so, I have this real gratitude that I get to love them. So that's me giving. But the real gift is that they're giving me the gift of them receiving the love. Because if you think about it, if you have so much love to give, but no one to give it to, you know, you're like, yeah, it's cool. But when you have love to give, you're the actual one that's receiving.
Mm, that makes
They're
sense.
doing they're doing you a favor, or
Mm,
not a favor, but they're the ones that are generous enough to open up their hearts, open up their minds to receive your love. Um,
wow.
yeah, so when you love from the overflow, it's really a mastery of loving free from condition.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna stop right now because I think
Yeah.
that your mic is on. So people that are editing this, my editors, if you just cut this out, please. I think your mic is on the computer mic and not this one. That not your
Oh,
Yeti. Can you check on that for me? Just make
yeah.
sure. If not, it's okay.
Yeah, it's actually on the Yeti, but maybe I have a speaker. Maybe I should take that one off. Mm,
It's okay. I just
yeah.
maybe it's my sound that's coming in that I need to turn up or something. It's fine. We'll get back to it. Okay. Are you bringing the Yeti closer? How's your internet
I'm moving
connection
the
today?
Yeah, maybe it's my internet. It's like dropping in and out. Let me try and hotspot. What I'll do, is that okay? I'll grab my phone and then I'll hotspot and then change it. Would that be better?
I mean, we could try it. Yeah, we can try it
Yeah.
because
All right.
yeah.
Here, give me a second.
Okay. Hello, 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 hello. Testing, 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 testing.
Let me do the hotspot. So is it sound cutting in and out, Justin?
Yeah, yeah. That's why I was seeing if it was the mic or the internet. I think it might be the.
Hotspot. Let me just check. Okay, cool. Is that better?
So far, yeah. It's funny. It's 2021,
Yep.
right? And people still have.
Yeah.
We all have internet problems. It's almost like shouldn't internet just be so amazing that none of us have issues? It's 2021. Like I can't they figure this out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's fine. Cool.
And
All right. So I'm okay. Editors, you can restart it now. So one of the questions that I had, I'm creating this parenting course. Well, first, let's tell the listeners what you currently do, like for a living. What is it that you do?
so I'm currently a coach, and I coach families. I coach parents. There's two things that I do. I coach first-time parents to be able to create that foundation as they are navigating through, from being a couple to being a family of three. That's a big deal. It's a real big deal. So I help new families create that foundation. And then I also coach, families that have older children and they feel disconnected to their children. Like, their children aren't listening to them. And it's so funny. All parents are like, oh, why don't my children listen to me? And so I help them understand that, it's not about that your children don't want to listen to you, it's that they feel disconnected from you. Um, and so I have a mastermind and a coaching program for people who want to heal their generational wounds, who want to discontinue the pattern of disconnection and
Uh,
what have you in their families.
cool, cool. So what I was saying was that yeah, that's great. So I was actually going to ask this question, what you just said. I'm glad you said it. It's a perfect transition. One of the topics as I'm writing this course on my experience, and by the way, our kids are the same exact I have my son is, well, you're just a little bit behind me. My son
Yeah.
is turning 3 in
Yeah.
less than a month, and my daughter's turning 6. So this very similar. I mean, 1 in 4
Yeah.
is what they were at. It's the same
Yeah.
separation. So I'm just experiencing things a little bit ahead of you in life.
Mm,
But
I love it.
we're going through the same, we're going through it. So I've worked from home this whole
Yep.
8 years. So I've been with all the growth. I've been with, yeah, all that. And I've actually cut back on work when my kids were little, from like 0 to 2, each of them, so I could be with them more and see this like really cool phase of 0 to 2. So healing generational wounds. This was a topic
Yeah.
that kind of comes up as I was creating this, and a lot of the reasons why we kind of are the way we are with ourselves and our kids and our relationships. What do you mean by healing generational wounds exactly when you use that statement?
Oh, I love this question. Our parents did the best they could with what they had, with what they knew, based on their consciousness at that time. Like, our parents absolutely did the best they could, right? And if I ask this question to a lot of adults, on a scale of 1 to 10, how seen, heard, and understood did you feel by your parents? Not, oh yeah, I know they love me, but like, how seen, heard, and understood did you feel? You know, a lot of people might say, yeah, well, I knew my parents loved me, but I didn't really think that they knew me. I don't think that they really understood me. And then if you ask them, okay, well, standing in your parents' shoes, if I ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did they love you? The question will be like a 15 out of 10. So where's the discrepancy? Like, why is it that our parents love us with all they had and all they could, like, but yet we couldn't feel that? And so for me, healing generational wounds, and I feel it from I believe that as spiritual beings, we chose our parents for whatever evolution we wanted. As we entered Earth's side, like, I do feel that we chose these two people to come through. And it's like what Khalil Gibran says, like, your children are not yours. They come through you, but they're not yours. There's something so much more infinite that you have been chosen to guide them
So
to
you
a
think
certain
that
degree.
you think we're like up, you think we're up there, and our spirits are pre coming into this earth, and we're like, okay, so we literally like pick and choose. We can't remember this obviously, but we're like, okay, we're gonna be the spirit that comes into this parent, and we're gonna go in there, like that kind of like That's what I'm picturing. I'm
Yeah.
picturing like everybody in line up there ready to jump in and come into the Earth's atmosphere and like jump into the parent they chose because they're like, oh, this one will be perfect for me. I'll teach them things and they'll teach me things.
That's so well, I don't want to like go too woo-woo here, but
Right.
I think, yeah, like you can kind of see it like that, right? Like see it like that, like consciousness wants to evolve. And so um what I believe, like, when your child came through and you're holding this incredible being, it's just perfection, right?
Mm.
Like there's nothing lacking. And so all of us have been children before. And so when we have been here earthside as children, we come through and we're like, we're whole. There's nothing lacking. If we receive, like, if we're upset about something, we like have this expectation that it will be met. We're so guided, we're so loved, we're just an open vessel, an open heart. We're not judging ourselves when we cry, we're not judging ourselves for wanting. And so for me, healing generational wounds is healing, it's bringing a greater understanding to all that we've created between ourselves and love. And so I love what Rumi says. He goes, like, your job isn't to seek for love, but your job is to seek all the barriers that you have created between yourself and it. And so it's all about being able to go, well, how do I heal all these beliefs that I've learned about love that aren't really love? So things like I'm unlovable, I'm a disappointment, I'm unworthy. Um, life is about control, or life is about being so free spirited. And so all of these things that disengage us from being able to dance with life are the things that we look to go, well, how can I do better? You know, one of the biggest things that parents have is like, I don't want my children to be sad, and so
Yeah.
it's this thing about being able to control the emotional state. But, if we learned how to be with their emotional state, because our children aren't looking for us to fix their emotional state. Um, so healing is all about, well, wow, like how can I accept my own humanity?
What? Yeah. And it's interesting how you say, we don't want our children to be sad. We don't want, we don't want our children to feel pain. We don't want our children to be lonely, end up lonely. We don't want our children to, what other things come to mind, Yumi? We don't want our children to
Be disappointed,
be disappointed.
to
Yeah.
fail,
To fail.
to fall
Yeah.
behind.
These all sound like when we say these things, they remind me of like fears, right? These fears we
Yes,
have.
yeah.
So are we, so what is that? What happened? Are we operating out of a place of fear more, or are we, I don't know how to ask this question, I guess. Um, is love taken out of that, or are we think we're loving, but we're actually like being fearful of things? I don't know how to word this correctly.
I think I know what you mean. So what I normally say with my in my coaching is meeting the fear with love. Like fear isn't here for us to. So I've just reframed fear basically in terms of what I teach, right? Yeah, because you're right. A lot of the times we're parenting from a fear-based place
Hmm.
because of our unresolved stuff, or not being able to understand our unresolved stuff from a different perspective, right? And so then when we're healing generational wounds, we can use parenting to observe how we're reacting and go, wow, was that my stuff that I've just projected onto my child? And so am I, like you said, am I parenting from a fear-based paradigm,
Yeah.
or am I parenting from love? And it's not to eradicate fear, but it's to go, well, how can I bring more love to this fear? So if my fear is that, oh my gosh, I don't want my child to fall behind, or I don't want them to be lonely and like make no friends, right? Um,
Be a
then we can look,
loser.
okay, yeah, be a loser, be teased. Then we can look at, oh wow, like where in our experience did that happen, that we thought that that is who I am,
Maybe, yeah.
versus, wow, like that happened and it's not who I am. And so therefore I don't need to project that fear onto my child.
I see. What is that? where that dissonance comes in? I think I'm using the right word. In the beginning, when you talked about the parent saying that they were a 15 out of 10 loving their child and the child feeling not as much of that. Do you think that has a lot to do with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of self-love has to do with it. A lot of being able to see themselves as a whole human being. And wholeness doesn't mean that you don't have challenges, and wholeness doesn't mean that you don't have these crazy emotions. Wholeness is being able to accept all of it. And when you know better, you can do better. I think wholeness is about accepting the humanity that is within you. So let's say you made a mistake. Like how do you forgive yourself? Let's say you're having a hard day. How do you give yourself some grace? Let's say you don't know how to do something and you're frustrated. How do you bring kindness to yourself? Because then when you are that for yourself, you're able to then hold space for your child when they're going through that. Because no child wants their parents to fix their emotions, but I think what children are looking for, and even most of us, what we're looking for is someone just to hold space. Like a lot of people, when they share their challenges, the last thing they want to hear is someone to fix it.
Mm, right.
They're just like, can you love me where I'm at? And the moment that you love me where I'm at, it's like I'm almost able to transcend that challenge that I'm facing.
It reminds me of in relationships, like
Yeah.
conversations sometimes with our spouse where we say something and it just doesn't feel like they're listening. They just want to tell you something or say something. And it's like, no, you're not. Can you just like, it's just, and I'm not saying this about my wife or anything, but we have our
Yeah.
moments, right? Everybody has their moments. And she'll say to me, like, no, you're not hearing me. And what
Yeah.
she's saying is
Yeah.
you're not creating that space to listen to what I'm saying. Instead, you just want to respond and fix and right
Yes.
and tell me things. And you're not. I just listen and create. And it's like, what do you mean? I am listening. I am creating. No, you're not right. And then so if we can't
Yeah.
even understand it ourselves,
Yeah.
how can we allow our children to have that for us? That's so cool. So it sounds like it's almost, and I get this feeling as I talking to you here, it's if we work with ourselves, like it kind of let everything else kind of unfolds a little more and we understand things more instead of, okay, here's what I need to do as a parent. Cause a lot of these parenting books are, here's how you discipline, here's how you do timeout, here's how you do, right? Like tells you what to do in
Yeah.
situations. And that's all you're focused on. What are we missing out on? What is,
That's yeah. It's a relationship. So they're just looking for you to connect. And so it's so funny. Like parents will come to me and like, how do I make my children listen? And I'm like, okay, I get it. And the key thing, if you really want your children to listen to you, focus on the connection. And they're like, what does that mean? And I'm like, well, if you think about it, when you're feeling really connected with someone, aren't you way more open to their influence? But if you're feeling disconnected to someone, don't you just like ignore what they say? And so then if you're having trouble if you're thinking that your child isn't listening to you, what they're really communicating is that I don't feel safe with you. Like we don't have a relationship right now that I can hear you or you can hear me.
Mm. And how that's so difficult to do in the moment, though, as a parent. I mean,
Hmm.
you please tell my audience that you're not perfect at this.
Oh, of course not. No, no. I am. It's Justin. I want to share with you something that the audience might love. Right. I love my humanity. Like, and I think that's what gives me so much. I'm so like a lot of mothers talk about motherhood guilt. I made a point to not go down there for me. Um, and I'm not perfect. So my 4-year-old son the other day, I asked him this question. I said, when do you feel unloved by me? Because I'm
Mm,
always checking in with him, like, when
mm.
do you feel whether he feels seen, heard, and understood? And I said, when do you feel unloved by me? And so Avery is this really beautiful child, and he's quite sensitive to tone and, you know, a look that you give him. And I'm so unconscious about that. And he goes, I feel unloved when you raise your voice and when you look at me a certain way. And I was like, wow, okay. And I said, is it, and I was like, and so I was thinking, okay, well, how do I empower him, right? In that moment, in those moments that he's scared. And so I said to him, oh, mommy has a pretty smelly attitude, like, during those times, don't I? And he goes, and then I'll start like, waving my hand around my nose. It's like smelly attitude. And he goes, yeah, it's smelly. And then I said, hey, so Avery, what if every time, even if we're in the middle of something, if you feel that I'm not hearing you or I'm judging you or you don't like my tone, I give you full permission to wave your hand and say, hey, mommy, smelly attitude. And I'll start again. And yeah, like he loved it. He loved it. And so I'm
That's
definitely not perfect. And I definitely give myself a lot of grace.
that check-in. The first off, that's powerful. Like that's that's extremely powerful. Because and I'm so glad you mentioned that. Brings up my awareness around that because I tell my daughter, my son's kind of little, he's 2, so he's almost 3. He doesn't understand. So I tell her like, hey, you can tell daddy anything, right? I make sure
Mm,
I say that probably every 3 or 4 days because I don't want her to feel like she has to hide stuff from me. Daddy's gonna love you no matter what, right? You can tell me
yeah.
anything. But I've never, and I just, so that's me like preaching to her, letting her know, which is fine, which is good. But I never really, do you feel like you can tell me anything?
Mm,
That's what this question makes me think. Do you feel like that, right? Or and then you said, when do you feel unloved by me? And let
yeah.
them take the wheel
Yeah.
and tell you. That's so powerful. That's it. Press
Mm.
pause. All done. It's all we need. Connection happened. Uh, cool. That's great. So you now when was this that you did this? You gave this smelly
Uh,
thing.
Probably about a month ago.
Has he used it yet?
Oh, all the time. Like,
No, he's just using it. Whatever.
and and then a couple of weeks after, I checked in on him and I said, okay, so what's something that you've been really grateful for lately? And he goes, when you taught me smelly attitude, mummy. And I said, oh, that really, and then he goes, yeah, like I'm not scared anymore. Like, and I'm like, thank you so much for trusting me. Like, so when we're talking about healing generational wounds, Justin, the first 7 years of a child's life, and please, parents, do not judge yourself. Do not go, oh my God, I screwed up my child. You haven't. It's always, the brain is plastic. So, we can always rewire. But the first 7 years are really prime for being able to hypnotize our children because they're in a hypnotic state. Like they don't have that analytical part of their mind that's kicked in yet. So to be able to program them to say that the world is safe, I'm lovable, I'm worthy, I'm more than enough is like ideal. And so that's what I'm doing with Avery, um,
Mm,
by doing my best, and I'm sure there's things that I've screwed him up over. Like,
right.
I'm sure of it, but
Sure.
I'm just doing my best so that he doesn't need therapy later on.
Even though all of our kids, we're probably doing something to it. Yeah, I have one more year
Sure.
left. Ari is almost 6. I have 1 year left no,
Yeah.
to well, in her hypnotic state. Yeah, that's funny. That's good. So how do we? But the thing is, like, how do you remind? What do you do to remind yourself to do these check-ins like this? Because we get so caught up in our day, and then all of a sudden, oh wow, I never checked in. I haven't done it in a while. Like, how do you remember that, or how do you remind yourself?
Oh, so yeah, Justin, I have to say the advantage that I had, so I'm really into self-mastery, right? And I was 29 years old going through a divorce. So it's often like you get this mastery when you've gone through some real dark stuff, right? Like you know what I mean? So I'm 29, going through this divorce, and my whole life, like I was a transformational coach at the time, but I didn't know how to be in relationships. And every relationship ended, and I'm like, well, I'm the common denominator. So I can't blame them. I'm like, whatever dysfunction we had in our relationships, I've got to own my part. Or actually, I've got to own it 100%. And I'm listening to Brené Brown's TED Talk on vulnerability. And in it, she says, vulnerability, like the wholehearted, are people who can ask for help. And I'm like, ask for help? I've never asked for help. Like, and even that word help, like it's had like a visceral reaction in my body.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've never been vulnerable in a relationship. And I was thinking, wow, like I've never actually even told my partners when I felt like unsafe or that I'm scared of, like I couldn't just tell them what I was going through. And so I would normally just build a wall and go, okay, the relationship's over, because I just got emotionally flooded so quickly when it came to relationships. So then I created this thing for myself, which was 1,000 days of daring greatly. Every day for 1,000 days, master what it is to live from your whole heart. Now, most of those 1,000 days, I knew what it felt like not to live from my whole heart. But then that gave me the understanding of what it does to live from your whole heart. And so then
You did that with journaling?
wholeheartedness.
Did you do that with
Yeah, so I documented. Yep, I
Okay, okay.
documented everything. Yeah. I wrote this down, documented it. So I kind of understood the mechanics of what happened in my body, what happened thought-wise, what happened um, internally. So I could feel it and understand it. And so then this practice, yeah, like you're right, like no parent in the middle of a moment with their child wants to go, hey, I'm just going to check in with my heart and check in with myself, right? Like it's like this freight train that just doesn't want to stop. Um, but I think that 1,000 days of doing that, and plus the meditation, all of that stuff, it helps me. And so even in the moments that I'm dysregulated from my child, I know that they're not looking for a perfect parent, but what they're looking for is, how do you reconnect when you're dysregulated? Like, how do you come back to center? How do you turn to your heart when you have turned away from it? And so, there may be a moment with Avery where he's like flooded, I'm flooded. He normally does this thing where he like goes into his room and shuts the door. So then I
Shuts or
know that,
slams?
slams, slams the door, slams the door. And so then I immediately go, okay, I'll stand outside his room and I said, I'm really sorry, Avery. So I apologize quite quickly. And then I give him space and I'm like, I apologize for what happened, Avery. I wasn't listening. I actually say to him, I wasn't listening to my heart. Mummy hasn't had a lot of sleep today and I've made it your problem. And then he will either say, go away, or I don't want to talk to you. I'm not ready yet. And I'm like, okay. And I want you to know I love you and I'm sorry. So I'll walk away. And when he comes out, I'll take ownership of it and go, yeah, like mummy had a really bad attitude then, and it's not your problem. And I apologize. And, it's the reconnecting that really matters with children.
You know, that
Um,
can I interject
yeah,
there?
of course. Yeah.
So, you say that and then what comes to mind sometimes is we've been conditioned that that's not how you be a parent.
Mm,
The condition is, afterwards, I love you, but you need to listen to mommy when I tell you these things. Like, otherwise mommy's going to get angry, or,
yeah.
not just mommy, daddy, you need to listen. Otherwise
Yeah.
daddy's going to get angry. He's going to flip out because you're not listening and behaving like you should be. So, next time think about that. That seems to be
Okay. Yeah. I
right.
love this. Can I share the secret to this?
Yeah.
So my thing is that my children don't have to listen to me. Well, actually, no one has to listen to you. Like, actually, no one has to listen to you. And so, as a coach, what I really learned is that it's a gift that someone gives me when they give me an opportunity to contribute to them. Like, I feel so grateful that they have to create such generosity in their heart and such courage to be able to listen to me. And so I really have it that my children don't need to listen to me. So I've never, and it's so funny because when my husband goes, "You're not listening to me," I'll say, "Well, they don't have to listen to you." And then, so our challenge is, so our challenge in our home is
Mhm.
having that alignment with parenting versus me with the children.
Yeah, so that's then that can be a challenge when I mean, I think that's a challenge for a lot of parents. There's, they're on 2 different pages with how to parent. Do you guys have well, I don't even want to get into that yet, the conversation. So how do you set boundaries then if they don't have to listen to you? Because we have to set boundaries.
Gotcha. Yeah, so boundaries are really important, right?
Yeah.
And so the boundaries that I create are about safety, about helping them regulate themselves. And so boundaries for me are from a place of being powerful versus powerless. So say, for example, when it comes to things like attitude, right? Like when it comes to like things like, so that like, let's say he'll say, "Mommy, get me some water now."
We've all we've all been there. I think it was this morning she said it, and I was like, "Do you want to rephrase that?"
Right. The tone can really get us, right?
Yeah.
But so what I do, okay, so from a psychological perspective, they're still experimenting with their tone.
Yeah.
They don't actually know that they're being rude. So
Mm.
rudeness is a label that we've placed on it.
Mm. Oh, yeah. Right. Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So
Interesting.
sometimes, and we think, "Oh my gosh, we better nip this in the bud because they're going to grow up being 24 years old and have no friends and no relationship because they're rude."
Wow, you're in everybody's head listening right now. You're in their heads.
You know, and it's like, "Oh my God." Yeah. So, which is fear
Yeah.
based, right? Which is like, you're not in the present moment.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
And so when you're creating boundaries from a place of fear, that's what becomes a power struggle. And your adrenaline goes up, your cortisol goes up. And so now you're reacting from that place. And I get it, but then the mastery becomes, okay, like, how do I not take things personally from my child? And if they're hijacked, they can't listen to you. So if they're hijacked and they're flooded, I mean, imagine when you're like so stressed and someone's trying to like teach you something. You'd be like, I don't know, you'll probably swear at them. I would. I'd be like, "I'm not listening to you right now. Like, get out of my face."
Right.
Right? Like, if we're stressed, we can't take anything in. So if the child is stressed and they're having a moment where they're so flooded, and you're like, "Hey, calm down," or like, "Don't do that," they're like, "You're not getting me." I'm like, "So I need you to help me regulate. I don't need you to help me. I don't need to teach you. You don't need to teach me right now. I just
Mhm.
need you to help me be okay with my emotion where it's at." Um,
You know,
and then,
yeah.
yeah, you go.
Yeah, it's yeah, so sometimes it's hard on camera to know when, there's the actual pause and when it's just a breath,
Mm,
when you're on the podcast. So I don't it's not me intentionally interrupting, but uh y- it's kind of like it's when you're saying this and I have to bring this back to my awareness. I'm glad you said this. When I talk to my children and say calm down, what if I said that to my wife during a moment? She would look at me and be like, "Do you want to live to see tomorrow?" You know what I mean? But like, it's okay for me to say it to my kid because it's my property or I own them or whatever. That's the whole
yeah,
thought process. No, it's not. It's so fascinating, so fascinating.
yeah,
But to be aware of that takes practice, and the more you practice your awareness around it, the more habitual it becomes, I'd imagine.
absolutely. And that's why self-love is the key to all this, because if you're not overflowing, you have no space for that awareness in that moment. Like, you don't, like,
Mm,
because if you think about self-love, if you think about self-care, it's like to clear my mind and to feel energized in my body. And once that mind body alignment happens, spirit comes through. So then you're not taking things like, I love Don Miguel Ruiz. Have you read his book, The Four Agreements?
Oh yeah, and then he's got the Mastery of Love too, I believe. It's kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great books.
So I love the agreement of everyone's doing their best with what they can in that in every moment, and that's our children as well. And nothing's personal. You know, our children don't wake up and go, I'm going to piss my parents off. Like, you know, I'm going to like give them the biggest tantrum and test them. No, our children
Are
have
you, are you
difficult
sure?
moments.
Are you sure? Because my son today said to me, threw something off the counter and said, "Daddy, you like that?" Are you sure about all of
Hilarious.
those? Threw out the counter. You like that, Daddy? And my wife and I looked at each other. We're like,
Yeah.
no.
So funny.
But you know,
Yeah.
there's different personalities, right? I mean, do you have one child that seems to, well, yeah, I guess you can see it coming on almost one, you said, is your other?
Yeah. They're
Yeah,
so
so
different. They're
different,
so
right?
different. Yeah. Um,
Uh,
and
Is one
yeah,
more
I get
challenging than the
triggered by,
other? Do you think?
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Second child more challenging or first?
Child. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
what the
second
heck?
child.
Same here. Same here. What is up with that?
Yeah. Oh, you know, because like with Avery, like since he was young and since he was born, he was always like, I could always negotiate with him, you know, and I could always communicate with him. And he was just this, and it's so funny because he is probably really similar to my husband. And yet my husband gets triggered by him the most because they're so similar. Yet I'm like, oh my gosh, Avery, I don't know what, you know, it's so easy to navigate. And then when
Mm.
we had the second one, I'm like, wow, this child, you know, like, then my husband's like, yeah, he's kind of like you know, like, in terms of
Uh,
attitude or in terms of like, you know, things so, you know, like just certain things that he does. And so he's been really my teacher in that, whereas my husband doesn't get as frustrated with him as I do.
mm. Wow. Yeah. Well, you've many years of teaching ahead of you of learning and unlearning then probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. That's mm. Well, so I guess uh, well, let me ask you this. I didn't really get an answer or we didn't finish up that thought when that water situation of like, I mean, I want to water right now. How do you react to something like that? What do you say or do?
So it depends on where. So when he was younger and he said that, right, I would
Hmm.
get the water. And the moment to teach him how to communicate wouldn't be in that moment. It would be like a few hours later or at bed. So then I would say, hey, do you remember how you asked me for water earlier today? And he goes, yeah. I'd be like, yeah, I felt really sad with the tone that you used. And he'll be like, oh. And then I said, how about like, can you next time, if you ask, could you say, hey, mommy, can you ask me for some water, please? Or like, you know, and then I'd practice with him. So I'll model it for him.
You know,
So that was when he was about like 2 or 3, right?
uh-huh.
And so now, like, we had that incident the other day where he's like, mommy, get me water now. You know, and I'm hungry. I want food, right? And this is like literally just the other day. And so then I just pause. I'm like, and then I would go down on his eye level, right? Because I don't want to talk on top of him and I don't want to
Mm.
talk over him. And I'm like, David, I would love to get you the water. And I find it really hard to respond to the way that you're talking to me. And so he'll look at me and he's like, well, I'm busy. I want my water, right? And then I'm like, yeah, I get it. And I'd love to get you the water. And then and that's it. I just leave it like that. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I'd love to get you the water too. And then he pauses and he thinks about it for a while. He goes, okay, so mommy, can you get me some water, please? I'm like, sure thing, darling. And so then I go get the water.
Oh, yeah, that's and now what I see there is patience too. I see patience as a valuable tool in that situation and
Mm,
presence. So here's what I see there: patience, presence, calm, self-love because you're not taking it personally. I see space because you're giving him space to make his own answer instead of telling him what to say in that moment.
Mm.
And there's a lot to that moment right there that we could learn from, I guess, as parents. That's good. Not easy. It seems simple. It
No,
sounds, when you say it, it sounds so simple to do, right? But we have to have
yeah,
all those things. We have to be present. We have to have the patience. We have to um I think one of the biggest things is not, I would say in those situations, not wanting the moment to end so you can go do whatever you're doing, scroll your phone or go talk to your other kid or
mm,
go do something else, because then you just get frustrated and you get, right, because you're not present and there in that
mm.
moment, because that's the only way you're going to be able to handle it like that, right, Yumi, is if you have full presence.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I said, like, when you said, well, how do you start your morning or what do you like think of the first thing? And I said, my highest purpose is to be so in love with my life. And so it'll be unloving to me when I when you're like at your worst self, you kind of feel it in your body and you kind of go, wow, like that didn't feel good. Like if I
Mm,
was to like retaliate with him or want to discipline him in the moment, like it's like I know that that's just putting fire with fire, right? Like why would I do that to myself? And so I'm like, what would like I actually think what would be the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? So in the moments that he's heated, like what's the most loving thing for me right now? Like that I know that sounds selfish, but it's not. Like it's actually a win-win for everyone when you come from this place of, okay, so what would be loving for me right now? Is it loving for me to try and fight my child, right? Or is that just going to get me more frustrated? Is it loving for me to try and know that I want to teach him something, but he cannot hear me? Like, is that going to serve me? And it doesn't, right? Because it just doesn't. Like, if they're so hijacked and you're trying to teach them, it's like you're setting yourself up for failure.
mm. You like, I know people that would listen to this conversation and roll their eyes the whole time,
Yep.
and number one, no judgment, right, first and foremost, because I get it. And number two, I think a lot of it has to do with being very a lot of is the being I don't want to say stuck in old ways, but just like limited and boxed in with perspectives and understanding that there's other ways to do things. There's better ways to do things. I really enjoy everything about this conversation and what you're saying, and a lot of it makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody listening, saying, "Okay, but then my kid's just going to be out of control all the time because all I'm doing is allowing him space to do whatever the hell he wants." But really, it's not. That's not what it is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. There's clear boundaries. So say for example, like I'm just trying to think like, okay, Avery loves chocolate, but he's not allowed to have it unless it's a Friday. Like we literally have this rule, right? And so then we have this pantry, there's chocolate in there. And of course he's going to test the boundaries. Of course he's going to go, oh, but I want chocolate today, mummy. And then I'm like, okay, I know you want chocolate and it's not Friday. And that's it. you know, and does he touch like, does he do things emotionally to try and get his way? Absolutely. Does he end up on the floor sometimes going, I want this? Yeah, absolutely. And I go, yeah, if I was I mean, adults have tantrums. I think that's what it is. Like I have so much capacity for their humanity because I have capacity for my own humanity.
Ah,
Does that make sense? So it's not that I'm perfect, like absolutely not, but I have so much understanding of my own humanity that I'm like, of course they're going to react that way. Because if I want something and I don't have it, I have an adult tantrum,
right.
you
And
know?
they're not even adults; they're like kids. They have right. Sometimes my daughter will say, "Dad, I'm only 5." You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
have your kids
exactly.
ever said anything like that?
Yeah, and the other thing is like, I mean, I think what it is because I'm clumsy, I'm forgetful, I'm like this supposedly this adult, but I just need to do these silliest things. And so I'm like, if I had to stop learning, well, I had to unlearn judging myself for a long time, Justin,
Mm,
right? And so then I think because of that, I'm like, yeah, kids do what kids do, and the emotional reaction is equal to what they're feeling, and we can hold a boundary, and we
And
can allow them to feel what they feel.
yeah, and yeah, it's this is so good, and I think it all starts and stems, and I actually I know it does with ourselves of like of relieving
Mm,
as much stress as possible, minimal minimalizing our life a little bit to relieve some of that stress and anxiety. A little bit less looking at our phones and social media to relieve some of
yeah,
the stress and anxiety. I know parents that it seems like they go from like phone to talking to their kids, phone to talking to their kids, phone to talk. You know what I mean? You can't. You'd lose your mind. Like I get why you'd get frustrated. I get why you'd go mad. Getting proper sleep so that
yes.
we can operate at our best selves. Meditation obviously is a huge factor. Um, Staying healthy, eating a little healthier, adding some healthy stuff to your diet. Would I go in here, add some more that you can think of to put yourself in the right position to be yourself best self to do this stuff?
You honestly hit the nail on the head. Like, that's it. It's like one of the things that really stresses me out is when you have a packed weekend. And so our family rule is one event per weekend, like one event, and that's it. Saying no to a lot of things.
Mm,
Um, and we have minimalized our life so much, especially in these early stages where, young children, they require a lot of attention,
a
and
lot.
so then you can't change the child. So then you have to change something else. Um, and so then, and being an entrepreneur and working from home, I have to change my expectations of how much I can work from home with young children at home.
Yeah.
And so if I know that really I can only do like 2 hours a day, but yeah, I have an expectation of like 4, 6 hours because I love what I do, that's on me. And so then I have to just like go with it. It's because it's almost like, let's say you're going into the ocean and trying to stop the wave. Like,
Yeah.
you
You
know who's
can't.
going to win.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's kind of like
Yeah.
my son is super challenging. I'd put him up against any other son out there at this age. And and like we're not parenting him any different. You might get a little less attention because he's not the only child than my daughter, but it's very similar. But to wake up and expect that he's gonna not challenge us, to wake up and expect he's not gonna scream for some random reason because he's thirsty. Ah, okay. Like just to expect like not it's just it's almost ludicrous. And
Yeah.
it would instantly just cause stress no matter what because of our expectations are different than what the true, it's actually, I don't know, allowing it to be or what is, then clashes, right? And I love
Yeah.
the Awakened Family. I'm sure you read that book by
Yeah.
Shafali to Sabari. Is that how
Yeah.
you say it? To Sabari?
Yeah. Yeah.
She says like we use our children to fix us
Yes.
in there. And I love that. I mean, it's harsh, it's brutal, but it's so true. We try to fix
Yeah.
our children, right? Change our children so that like we don't have to deal with them, that whatever they're going
Mhm.
through. When
Yep.
it's like, dude, have some more self-love, work on yourself. And that's
Yeah.
when things will. Hmm. This has been a great conversation, by the way.
I love this. I think I'm gonna give an analogy to the listeners out there. So imagine you had like a seed, right? And it's an apple seed, and you plant this seed. And then, as it's growing, you're like shouting at it, grow faster, or like, I don't want you to be an apple. I want you to be a strawberry right now. And I want you to like go this way and not that way. That's what we're doing to our children when like they're just like, well, this is how I am. I don't know any different. And it's your job to create an environment to help me grow. And so when we see it like that, so when I see my children like that, their children are being children, and what is the most effective way to teach them resilience? What is the most effective way to be able to show them how to be respectful in relationships? It's, it's not in the moments that they're hijacked. As much as we want to teach them in that moment, that's more of our stuff rather than them. But if we
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, how effective do I want to be when I teach? Like, do I really want to teach effectively, or am I just trying to deal with something because it's my fear? And if we are committed to being effective in how to guide them, wouldn't we want to set ourselves up to be like for success rather than trying to like say something when no one's hearing it,
Right.
like, and then getting frustrated with ourselves and frustrated with them, and then the disconnection, like, gets bigger and bigger. Um, so yeah, Justin, I want to re-emphasize for the listeners, like, I'm not perfect, but I know what it feels like as that child where your parents love you so much and you couldn't receive it. And I think because of that, that's why I'm so passionate about teaching this stuff, because I was that 16-year-old that went through mental health issues. I was that 16-year-old that took really risky choices. And when I became a parent, that was like the years that I'm really scared of. And I realized that, teenagers, when they need you the most, they're not just going to come to you because you're their parent. They come to you based on the consistency that you have had when you show up for them since they were young.
Mm, that's good.
That trust is earned.
Yeah.
It's not an entitlement because you're their parent.
Thank you so much for sharing this. If you, Yumi, if you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self any words of wisdom or advice, what would you
Mhm.
say to them?
I would say to her, she's enough.
You know,
Mm.
thank you so much for being on my podcast. You shared great, beautiful insight. I'm going to listen to this for sure again. Um, what, where can we find you? And um, yeah, what site? What's your webpage again?
Awesome. So it's www.themotherhoodmindset.com. So I send out a weekly newsletter to all my subscribers that way. And you can also just find me on Facebook. So it's Yummi Nguyen, YUMMI dot Nguyen, NGUYEN.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to press stop.